what is my outlook for Quant in 2025? Even though nothing I say is financial advice, I'm still hypothetically excited because even though the idea of maybe 2000 when it comes to Quant hasn't left my mind, I'm still thinking about that, which I'm going to get into later. But I first want to take a look at something I've seen from history. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same this time around, but it does leave me some clues, which I'm going to take a look into. Like, for instance, altcoins typically as a worst case scenario. They usually peak around a year and a half after a Bitcoin halving event. So if we add a year and a half from April of last year, which was when the last Bitcoin halving event happened, it would mean October this year. Now, granted, some people may think, okay, that's kind of a short time frame because they're like, okay, we're already in September right now. Let's say we extend it all the way until December because, again, that October timeline is just based off history. It doesn't mean it's going to happen this time around. So let's say maybe it's extended until December. Like, even then, sometimes you may think, like, that's not that much time. And I'm totally aware of that maybe in other markets, other sectors. But when it comes to this space, we take a look at, for instance, Bitcoin, right? Which is literally the largest thing out there that we have right now within this space. Take a look at how fast that moved. And again, that's literally the biggest thing out there. So if that's the case, what would the movement hypothetically be like if we do ever see one when it comes to something like Quant, which is an altcoin, by the way, and then also the market cap is just way lower. So then, this is just my perspective. Who knows, only time will tell, but let's say we just use like a different example. Let's say we don't use Bitcoin, right? Let's say we use something like Shiba Inu or Dogecoin. Just imagine what kind of volume is needed to make those projects even do a 50%. You know what I mean? Like hypothetically do a 50% movement upwards. It's kind of a lot considering their market cap is pretty massive. However, keep in mind, it's not like Quant is necessarily a small cap either. I mean, the market cap's pretty massive, but it's not that massive. And again, the market cap is just way lower. It doesn't mean it's going to do anything, hypothetically, but then to me, I just like the whole vibe when it comes to Quant because even when I take a look at Quant, right, the maximum supply, now this is going to be dependent on where I take a look at it, but it's kind of in this range about around 14.5 to around 14.8 million. But even besides that, the maximum supply of Bitcoin is 21 million. So this is like, again, the maximum supply of Quant. Even if we consider like around 14.8 million, that's still over 5 million less than the maximum supply of Bitcoin. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's better because how can it, in terms of popularity and just attention overall? I mean, I'm just realistic. Like, I don't think it is viewed as in the same regard. But then just that rarity, I think, kind of, makes me a little bit sort of like, wow, a little bit. But this is just my, perspective. But even besides that, I think that would all kind of mean nothing if the fundamentals weren't good. However, the fundamentals hypothetically seem good to me, just in my mind. So then I think hypothetically that kind of, relatively speaking, low maximum supply kind of means something. Because if I take a look at the Quant network, it's made up of the Overledger OS and the Overledger network. But then because the Overledger network is made up of the Overledger OS users and the Overledger OS users on there can share their data, their apps, their resources, and monetize them. That's kind of the basic gist of it. So I'm just going to kind of move on straight towards the Overledger OS, which I think is pretty interesting and cool anyways, instead of me just kind of going onto the Overledger network. But besides that, again, Quant network made up of the Overledger OS and the Overledger network. And when it comes to the Overledger OS, what it does is that it allows something called a multi-chain application to be built. So this is pretty interesting in my opinion because traditionally, right, we see oftentimes developers, they have to be stuck building on only just one blockchain, which is kind of limiting actually when I think about that because imagine, right, sure, one blockchain may have some advantages, but what about the disadvantages, It's not like it's just going to be this perfect blockchain because I don't think one actually exists. This is just my perspective. However, even besides that, again, if there's such thing as a multi-chain application and then it can be built on top of multiple blockchains, again, an application. That I think is pretty interesting, pretty cool. This is just my perspective, right? Because imagine one blockchain has some weaknesses, however, it does have some positives. However, again, that weakness, so to speak, can maybe be supplemented through a different blockchain, right? That may have a strength in that area where that may lack. You know what I mean? But then, to me, this is just kind of what I find pretty cool when it comes to the Quant network, and also more specifically the Overledger OS and multi-chain applications. Now, the main argument that sometimes people may tell me is that, but the adoption isn't the best. I'm totally aware of that. And sometimes mass adoption may take quite a while in some cases. But then to me, I just like the concept anyways. I just like the whole vibe overall. I find it pretty interesting when it comes to Quant. Also, Quant at the price of 2,000, market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around 24 billion, which is around a 19x. So it doesn't seem like it's that far away. And also, even though only time will tell, like that market cap, first of all, we've kind of seen Shiba Inu nearly double that back in 2021 in terms of market cap. And we've kind of seen something like Dogecoin nearly pretty much almost 4x that in terms of market cap back in 2021. So to me, it's not something like too outlandish. Now, if the market cap needed was like 400 or 500 billion, it's not even something I would even entertain in my mind, right? But then it doesn't seem like that ridiculous, maybe, but again, only time will tell. But when I take a look at kind of the scenario right now, with over 600 million crypto owners, supposedly, which is allegedly more than ever before in history, when I take a look at, the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF, to me, I just find like, if maybe, let's say there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season during the cycle, and the key word is if, let's say, right? It wouldn't surprise me that if it looked better than back in 2021, and $2,000 when it comes to Quant wouldn't necessarily surprise me either. However, sometimes people like to say, oh, why don't you pull up a price chart and just draw some random triangles? Well, if I did that, do you think the market is gonna look at that and be like, oh yeah, I guess it's time to do this now? No, it's not, right? It's not gonna care what I draw on that price chart. So if I just draw a random triangle and then the market moves and then I just keep adjusting it, then I'm just drawing. I'd rather just talk about what I'm doing, the fundamentals of the project, just kind of the whole vibe overall, because if I'm only taking a look at the price chart, it doesn't really kind of show the full picture, in my opinion, as to what the project kind of is. It's just my mindset, though, which is why, again, ultimately, even despite the timeline I talked about earlier in the video, the exact moment in time precisely, that's going to be beyond my control. Like, I would not be able to know that, right? So to me, again, all I'm doing is just staying patient, holding, dollar cost averaging, and that's it. And I knew entering into this, I was going to have to wait a lot, because keep in mind, when I was talking about Quant back in 2022, ever since then, I've seen many projects outperform it, right? So to me, I've been waiting for quite a while. But then I kind of expected that, because I knew that using the strategy, hypothetically, of just like, waiting, dollar cost averaging, and just holding like that, I knew there was going to be a lot of waiting. But again, I'm not necessarily complaining, because I kind of knew that heading into it. However, to me, again, if I have to wait, it is what it is, but I'm staying patient, and feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's Malik the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.